Amen. Thanks, Rick. If you have one of those masks like we do, where it's like custom made with a filter, and then your wife puts in another filter, and it's like you're like getting 40% oxygen now. Feel free to just like take a break for a moment, while I'm preaching, and breathe freely. We want to be careful, but we want to be sensible. So this morning, we're going to continue on our theme of forgiveness. And if you haven't been here, or if you've forgotten, just to bring you up to speed, in the summer we talked a lot about covenant community, what it means to be the people of the church. And then a couple weeks ago I talked about there's two other really significant parts that make up the church, and that is, of course, the place. And we recognize because of COVID, the place where we meet was challenged, and we had to figure out new ways of meeting. But this other idea of praxis is how do we actually live out what we are teaching, believing? How do we live out that faith that we talk about and that we read about in the Bible? And so the first thing, the first sort of practical application of praxis that we looked at was this idea of gratefulness. And so during Thanksgiving we did a gratefulness challenge. And then we moved into forgiveness. And so last week I asked these questions about forgiveness. What does it really mean to forgive? Why should we forgive? How do we forgive? And of course, who do we forgive? And last week we looked at the parable of the unmerciful servant, or the unforgiving servant, this guy who was forgiven this great debt, and then went off and went after this other person that he knew that owed him a way smaller amount. And it's quite a famous parable. But I mentioned in that story that there's these challenges because of the essence of that story, that we forgive because we're forgiven, and we forgive because if we don't, we won't be forgiven. Those are sort of challenging themes, especially when you consider the whole theme of Scripture and what Jesus taught us about how to receive forgiveness from the Father. And so I don't want to spend too much time on that, but if you missed it and you want to go check it out, it's online. Easily find it on our webpage or our Twitch account. Twitch. Church is using Twitch. If you probably don't know what Twitch is, but it's an online video gaming platform. But it actually works really well for streaming church too. And hockey and all these different things. Forgiveness, though, according to Scriptures and what we learn in the Bible, literally means, and I wrote down the word last week, the Greek word aphiemi, which means to let go. And often, we've been taught and we've thought about forgiveness as this transaction between two people, or one person, asks for forgiveness, and then we decide whether or not we want to give it, and then we give it, and then there's this transaction that happens, and forgiveness happens. But really, aphiemi is not I'm giving you something because you've asked for forgiveness. It's actually that I'm letting go of something. And forgiveness is this idea that it's actually a thing that happens inside of us. It is something that can happen between two people. Obviously, that's sort of reconciliation, right? But forgiveness is us coming to a place where we can let go. So forgiveness is more actually about what we are willing to give up than what we are willing to give. This week we begin to look at how do we forgive? How do we forgive? And we probably know from personal experience that it's not as easy as, oh yeah, I should really forgive that person. It's not good to hold a grudge. So in my mind and in my heart, I forgive you. And we know that it's not that simple, because sometimes bitterness and hurt is really deep. And it's really hard to just let go of an offense. My wife and I and my daughter Anna watched a miniseries this past week on Netflix, and it's called When They See Us. Has anybody seen that? Yeah. So When They See Us is this miniseries about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Central Park 5 that happened in I think 89. It was this big thing that happened in the States when sort of New York City was just rampant with crime. There were these groups and mobs that were going around New York City and causing a whole bunch of issues. A lot of rape and murder. The police were really clamping down on things. And these 5 young kids got caught up in it all and ended up being charged for raping this lady who was called the Central Park Jogger, and they went to prison, and they didn't do it. We find out later that they were exonerated from the crime. The person that actually did the rape came out later and admitted to it. And as you watch this mini-series, it's what's really difficult to watch, actually. It's really, really hard to watch. And of course, it is, biased. I mean, it's from this other side it's from the point of view of those 5 kids. I would say it's probably heavily racialized, and if you think about what's going on in the States and Black Lives Matters and George Floyd and all this stuff that's been going on in the States, it makes sense why this kind of discourse needs to happen, because we need to start to change. Like, there's just a lot of injustice, and it's in a system that was never set up to provide proper justice. But again, I mean, watch it with an open mind and an objective mind. And I actually got on a total rabbit trail the other day, just looking up, the history of it and both sides of the story. But essentially, this was it. These 5 kids were hauled in the midst of all this stuff of social anxiety that was going on in New York at the time, and they were charged for a murder that they didn't commit, and they served years and years. One of the kids, who was 16 at the time, was tried as an adult and went straight to Rikers prison. And the story is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. There's this really powerful scene in the 3rd episode, and I'm sorry if I'm giving this away, but there's this one character whose father had convinced him in the police station to admit to the crimes so that they could just go home. And this was what was being told to them: if you just admit, oh yeah, and these kids were like held in the police station for 30 hours or more without food or sleep. And so they got these videotaped confessions from them, and the one father basically forced his child to admit to something he had done, in the thought that they would just be able to go home and put it behind them. And of course, this child ended up in juvie and then in adult prison. And so you can imagine, as a kid, your father is your hero. He's making you do this thing that you, in your mind, know is not right. And yet, you listen finally, and then this horrible thing happens. And so this one child, his name was Antron, you can imagine how he felt about his hero, his father, after this. And so there's this powerful scene in the movie when they get out, Antron is back home, and he's living there, and his father has returned because he actually abandoned the family during the trials. His father had returned. He's very sickly and weak. And this moment where the sickness of his father, the frailness, brings up a compassion in Antron, and they embrace. And it's this moment, this amazing moment of reconnection, of forgiveness. And so you see what happens in Antron is that the hatred towards his father, because of his father's condition, turns into compassion and love, and then he's able to forgive. And so we want to focus this morning on what it means to actually do this, to get to a place where we can forgive in our hearts, like Jesus mentioned last week in the parable, right? Don't just forgive, but forgive from your heart. It's an inner thing. This morning, I want to just quickly look at a scripture. We're not going to dissect the scripture because it's pretty plain what's going on in this story, and you've heard it many, many times, but it's found in Luke 23. And 32 to 34, and you don't even need to follow along, or I don't have it on the screen, and that's totally fine. It's a really quick scripture. I would rather you imagine the scene, and of course this is Jesus' crucifixion, and he has just recently been wrongly accused. They've brought in and paid witnesses to wrongly accuse Jesus. He's been beaten and he's been tortured. He's been deprived of food and sleep. He's been made to drag his cross through the streets of Jerusalem and to the hill where he is going to be crucified. And so here in Luke 23, verse 32, this is Jesus hanging on the cross. And the story is that two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. And Jesus said, Father, imagine what has just gone on. And there he is, Jesus, hanging on the cross. And in order to speak, he has to push up on his nailed feet in order to breathe in air as he's hanging from his arms. And he uses that air to speak, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And I point out this significant moment in the story of Jesus' crucifixion because to me, it is about the most significant example of forgiveness anywhere. How was Jesus able to forgive in that moment? I mean, I know we think of Jesus as God, and we should, but we often neglect how human he was. Of course, Jesus was divine and powerful and all that kind of stuff, but he was fully human. So how, in his human state, was Jesus able to forgive? After being wrongly convicted and brutally tortured, left to suffocate and die on the cross, he chose to take his last breath and forgive his accusers. So, there's kind of this thing that is the answer for everything in life. Can anybody guess what it is? What's the answer for everything? It's not Jesus. I mean, sorry?
42.
42. Oh gosh, we've got a nerd among us. If you don't know what Brad's talking about, that's good. What is the answer for everything?
Love.
Love. Love is the answer. And so in this idea of forgiveness, we need to recognize that it's not enough to just think that you can forgive or try to forgive. Somehow we've got to bring in the answer. And the answer is love. And so why was Jesus able to forgive? Well, because the whole reason he came was because of his love and his compassion for his people, for his creation. And so the first step in forgiveness is love and compassion. We saw that in this example, in this mini-series, where Antron, because of the state of his father, breaks down and loves his father and has compassion for him, and then there's this moment of just incredible forgiveness. I think, and there's sort of some scriptures that could support this idea, but it doesn't explicitly, you don't find this explicitly in scripture, but I think if you hate someone in your heart, it is impossible for you to forgive them in your heart. If you hate them, there's no possible way that you can actually forgive. Now, I don't know for those that watched this mini-series, if you watched the interview with Oprah afterwards. No? So, the mini-series was very difficult to watch, but I have to tell you, there was a moment in this interview. So Oprah invited all the cast, the director, and the actual original, men now, the five boys, 5 men, to come, and she interviewed them all. And the most powerful thing in this whole story, to me, was the most tragic thing. Because this boy Antron, who grew up to be a man, and in the show we see forgive his father, he actually hadn't in real life forgiven his father. There's a moment where Antron is talking about his experience, and the question was, what did you feel or experience in that moment where you found out they accused, or they called you out guilty? And Antron said, in that moment, I lost my religion and I hated everyone. And that hate and anger you see in him specifically. Among the 5, when you're watching this interview, you see that. And you see Antron as a broken man. And he admits even to it. And he says his wife tells him he needs to go to therapy, but he doesn't want to. And he's broken, and he says to Oprah, no, I haven't forgiven my father, I hate him. It's real, it's authentic, and it's heart-wrenching. Because you can see how broken this man is, because he's held on to the hate. You can't forgive someone if you hate them. So, it's a fairly simple concept this morning, and I thought it would be much better than me trying to convince you of it, that we would actually practice it. That we would actually practice this idea of this first step of love and compassion on the road of forgiveness. And so I've asked Carmen if she would actually lead us in a meditation. Now I'll tell you, it's not a meditation on forgiveness. Because I think sometimes it's better to just take one step at a time. This morning, we're going to be doing a loving kindness, compassion meditation. And there's a copy of the meditation that you can find at the table on your way out or over here. And really the idea here, you can come up, you want a mic, or you can drop your mask too. The idea here is we're not worried and concerned about forgiveness right now. Our whole goal right here is to foster a heart that is able to forgive. A heart that has the space, essentially, to let go. Yeah. I want to mention too that on the website I've set up a resource page, and if sort of the mindfulness meditation thing is new to you or even concerning to you, I'll tell you a quick story. My mom, I love her so dearly. But we did a series a little while ago at our old church where we encouraged people to do a mindfulness meditation before working on the little small group study. And I asked my mom if she did it, and she's like, I'm just not comfortable doing that. And I asked her why. Because this mindfulness meditation that we got them to do it's Christian. It focuses on the presence of God. And she said to me, well, I appreciate prayer, and I'm learning to appreciate mindfulness and meditation. I just don't think they should go together. Anyways, my mom. I love my mom. So anyways, if you're new to mindfulness meditation and how that relates to prayer and meditation, I've got a couple of meditations on the website that you can check out, and they're really great. One of them is my favorite meditation, just meditating on the presence of God, and the other is actually fits really well with this loving kindness one, and he does some teaching about Christian meditation at the beginning of it. So, anyways, we're going to take, I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but I encourage you to see what this does in you and to be open to it.
So, if you just want to get comfortable and just notice yourself in this place with the people that are around you, and feel free to close your eyes or to lower your gaze, and just feel your breath. Just come and notice the rise and fall of your breath, or as it comes in through your nose and out. And just picture your breath being that breath that Jesus blew into Adam. And it is his essence and his spirit in you as you breathe. And as you're paying attention, if your mind wanders, that's okay. That's what minds were made to do. Just allow yourself to come back to your breath. And I just want to take a minute or so to notice your breath. And as you're noticing your breath, allow the presence of the Father to fill you. And with every breath, maybe we start at the top of our head, we just let tension go and bring all that is in our minds and in our bodies to Jesus, and allow his presence to fill you with every breath. Maybe that feeling of a warm blanket around you. Because his presence is here. And I want you to picture what Jesus would say to you. And he would say that I knit you in your mother's womb, and that I see you, and you're good. And just allow that sense of love and His presence to come around you. And if you struggle thinking that you are good, if you struggle being kind and loving towards yourself, maybe picture yourself as you were when you were 5 or 6, or picture a time where you were embraced by a grandparent or a parent or a friend, and that felt feeling of being accepted and seen. Just allow that to encompass you. Because the Father knows you, and He delights in you, and He loves you. And if your mind wanders, that's okay. Just bring yourself back to the breath. And with that felt sense of love and compassion towards yourself, in your mind, say, may I know love. May I know acceptance. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May the presence of the Father be known to me. May I live with ease. May I know the love of the Creator. May I be safe. Now if we could just take a big breath. And I'd like you to picture an acquaintance, somebody that maybe is your neighbor, someone maybe that you saw at a grocery store, just someone that is known to you. And if you could take that felt sense of compassion and love and understanding that the Father saw them as they were knit in their mother's womb, and that He delights in them. And could you say to them, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be held with compassion. May you be safe. May you live with ease. And just allow that felt feeling of compassion to be extended to them. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they know compassion. May they experience the presence of the Creator. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they live with peace. And if you could just take another breath. Now I'd like you to picture somebody who you have maybe a little bit of annoyance with. Don't pick somebody who you've got a lot of big emotions with when you're just learning this practice, but pick somebody that there's some resistance when you think of them. And just picture them in front of you, and then take that felt sense that you had of compassion and love, and that thought of the Creator looking at them, knitting them in their mother's womb, proclaiming over them that they are good. can you say to them and extend to them compassion? May they be filled with loving kindness. May they know compassion. May they be safe. May they encounter the presence of the Creator. And just recognize and be gracious to yourself if this is hard for you. And just accept where you are in this journey of forgiveness. And may they be filled with loving kindness. And may they experience compassion. And may they encounter the Creator. And may they be safe. And may they be healthy. And may they live with ease and peace. Just come back to your breath, and let's just notice our breath for about 3 breaths. The rise and fall of our chest are coming in and out of our nose. And may we be compassionate with ourselves, recognizing that we're all on this journey of learning to be compassionate and forgiving towards ourselves and towards others. And so as we go this week, Father, awaken us and transform us to an understanding of walking with forgiveness in our hearts and in who we are and in what we practice. Transform the way that we think, transform the way that we feel. And we thank you, Lord, that you are here and that you're journeying with us exactly as we are. In Jesus' name, amen.
So you have a model of what this looks like now. If you take one of these home, I encourage you, you can go as deep as you want, right? This morning we just kind of went to that place where maybe there's someone that kind of annoys us and is always annoying us, and somehow we may need to let something go there and release that. But there's people in our lives that, well, it's going to be harder to forgive. But we recognize also that that's no way to live. So if this becomes difficult or a struggle, or if you want to talk to Carmen or I this week, of course, feel free to do that. But I encourage you to give this a try. And in a couple weeks, we want to have another opportunity for people to share their experience of forgiveness. I know, like, Pat was so looking forward to sharing at Thanksgiving, but she wasn't there. She loves public speaking. We ran out of time, and Greg wasn't able to share because everybody loves to. So yeah, in a couple weeks, we want to encourage each other, and we want to experience this stuff as a community, as a family.